Sorry, just realized the mic was not on. Welcome back to my self management training series. I'm Angela Tran from Evo Skills. So let's get started. This one is episode 7, and this is a culmination of the last 6 episodes in a summary and a reflection. So, tagline is From Self Awareness to Success, Summarizing the Tools You Need. So, if you're newly joining this series, this is part of a multi episode. So far, what I've gone through and released are the beginning of just understanding self awareness. And I'll recap on what that means and nicely summarize it. So, this is episode 7. Definitely go to the channel and this playlist for the last few episodes. Disclaimer before I get started, this information provided is for general information purposes only and is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. By watching or listening to this episode, you acknowledge that the creator is not liable for any actions taken based on the information provided. All right. So, again, if you're new, this series is designed for you if you're designed to increase self confidence and believe in your abilities. You're ready to gain clarity and direction in your career path. You want to build confidence in making a career transition, or you simply want to be more adaptable to change. Or lastly, to build resilience to navigate the ups and downs of career change, job search, or working environment. So, because of my corporate background, you notice that this is, though it's going to be more self-awareness, probably more psychology like, it is especially a foundational piece inside our workforce. So, this is gonna, like I said, be a recap. So it would be a great summary. I won't go as in depth as the other episodes, but I'll cover kind of at a high level and string it all together for you of how the last few lessons and last few episodes have gone through. So I'm going to start off as what is self-management. So this is in the slide, there's 4 boxes, basically our meta skills framework. And what are meta skills? They are essentially the skills that help us learn other skills. I know a lot of people actually don't know this word or these set of skills. And then usually when I describe it, it gets confusing. Just know it helps you build on other skills and the foundational pieces of it. So there are 4 pillars in our meta skills framework. And this series that is free is the self-management one, which we define as the ability to manage thoughts and behaviors to promote self-acceptance. Now, why is self-management important? It has a direct impact on developing, utilizing other core skills. So if you look at this diagram here, it's kind of at the center. If we can't, if we don't have the ability to manage our own kind of self-awareness and our thoughts and behaviors, it does limit us or might prevent us from building other skills. So it's a very core and critical skill that I feel like, at least in my educational background, we don't get a lot of exposure to. And then as adults in the workplace, it becomes kind of challenging sometimes navigating our own minds. So alongside this framework, there are levels of progression. So in our framework, there's 4 levels. So the first one is feel, second is see, 3 is do, and 4 is create. So feeling is simply about our intuition. Kind of everybody starts here. What is our immediate reaction to any of these skills, or as we're using it? It's just innate to us, kind of nature. So in the discipline of self-management, I describe it as a gut reaction to an emotion. Second, C, for self-management, I describe as self-awareness. So our ability to objectively observe our internal self, body, thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. And then do is followed with create. So doing, of course, is being able to manage any or replace any negative reactions with productive behaviors, like we always do, towards self and others. And then create is about creating a psychologically safe and thriving environment for ourselves and others. So this level of mastery is also put alongside the other frameworks, the other disciplines in the meta skills framework, but this one is tailored to just self-management. And right now, what's been released so far is really practicing level 2 skill. I think this is one that we generally, when we think about, even if you read self-help books or any type of blogs and articles. So we usually jump to the how or the doing part, but I think it's a step that we all often miss to practice, because if you can't observe our internal self, then it is very difficult to even implement the how to, right, if you can't see it. So then in episode 2 we covered what is self-awareness, and because this level 2 is about self-awareness, and borrow a definition from helpful professor here. So self-awareness is the conscious knowledge of one's own character, feelings, motives, and desires. And they actually break it down into two: internal self awareness and external self awareness. In this series, we are focused mainly in internal self awareness, which is the recognition and understanding of one's internal states, preferences, and emotions and thoughts. So, and alongside, I've also created a iceberg model of self-awareness to help us kind of see the levels. Because a lot of people, even for me, will say, "Oh, Angela, you're really self-aware," or even, I might say to others, "You're really self-aware." And for the most part, more, um, a lot of people are, right. They're able to see what they did, what happened in the past, or maybe say, "Oh, that wasn't the best side of me," right? I could have done it this way. I could have reacted differently, right? That's also a level of self awareness. But as I was developing this framework and coaching clients, I realized that we needed a bit more, I would say, definition of self awareness, maybe a more in depth. So there's this iceberg model, and I just developed into 4 levels. And this is very closely aligned to the iceberg model of Pathfinder's coach, which inspired this. So, level 1, which is above the water, kind of like the iceberg, the tip of the iceberg, right, is what happens. So, reactions or actions or physiological responses. Again, most people can kind of see this most of the time, I would say, at least people I've worked with, friends, family, even my kids can look back and say, yeah, I shouldn't have behaved that way, right? In this certain scenario. Now we start to go underneath the water. Level 2 is about patterns, right? Can you identify repeated behavioral patterns that you react in a certain way, or yourself, and notice, like, hey, I noticed that during these types of scenarios, I tend to react very similarly, right? So for me, the example I've been using is participation in the workplace, especially in a brainstorming session. In fact, if I really think about it, it happens in school as well for me. And at work, I don't really like to speak out a lot of times, especially in a group setting, with a fear of being just the fear of being wrong. And wrong leads to other thoughts, right? So underneath, if we go a little bit deeper into the water, level 3 are our thoughts. So in what I just described, what recurring thoughts reinforces the behavioral patterns, what emotions might have emerged. So it's kind of getting into that into my example, right? My thought that keeps coming up is that I'll be wrong, and wrong is no good, right? Wrong is bad. I therefore, actually, even now, raising my hand is very, I don't really have a strong desire to raise my hand, even in any type of setting, just because the potential of answering something wrong is deeply ingrained in me to be a very negative experience. And then so we go all the way down, which is super hard. This level of 4 is our core belief, what underlying belief supports our recurring thoughts, right? So for me, actually, what I discovered through this process is my core belief is about belonging. I'm afraid of being wrong, and therefore, because I'm wrong, I'm not good enough to be in the crowd. There's rejection that actually ties to it for me. So, pretty interesting stuff. So, those are the levels. So, if you're able to get down, I would say, practice the skill of observation. I'm going to go through some tools to get down to the core belief. Incredibly empowering, even if you aren't able to do anything with it yet, but able to see that, because to get to that level is, I would say, even for me, has been very challenging. And just being able to realize that. So for at least the top, I would say 3 levels, I'll go through an example of how this might look like. So this is a framework from called chain analysis. And so I put my own version to it. So, if you think about this, because I'm very systems based, and input goes through our internal process and output. So what event around us is happening, right? That's my input. Then I take the input and internally process it, right, by my own thoughts and my own feelings and emotions. And then it creates a certain behavior, which is my output, and a certain outcome. So if we look at this framework, what does that mean in terms of self awareness, right? So, what happened? Level one. So, ABCDE, right? Situation starting. Most people can usually describe, hey, in this situation, this is what happened, and this is what I did, and here is the outcome of the event, right? So, in the example of where I didn't want to share in a work brainstorming session, the behavior is no input was providing through the session, and then the outcome is probably missed opportunity to help the team. Not that I didn't think about or didn't have any ideas to provide. I was just too scared, right, to be wrong. And then also from a performance standpoint, I could be seen by my manager, if he was there a team lead or other team members, as disinterested, right? If you're sitting there quietly and I'm just typing, it doesn't seem like I'm contributing, it can be easily interpreted that way, right? Especially in a work environment. So then we move on to level two about identifying patterns. It's about repeated behavioral patterns, right? So then if I really, think about and analyze kind of my past behaviors and ask myself, do I do this in other scenarios, right? I might make the connection. Again, this is sometimes hard, and sometimes talking to other people helps you be more aware of that. For me, is that in classroom settings, I think back when I was in school, I also don't like to speak up. In fact, I'm going to some classes now, and I rarely raise my hand and say anything. I do try to push myself now, and say, "Hey, it's okay. Let's just share your ideas." A lot better at it, but my natural instinct is to not do that. So I start to see kind of different scenarios. I do the same behavior. And then in level three, what are my thoughts, recurring thoughts that reinforces that behavior, right? Because it's creating an emotion of fear, rejection, and sometimes even shame for me, right? So thoughts, like I said, my thought that keeps coming up is like, oh, might be incorrect or wrong. They might think my idea is stupid. Right. Those are the thoughts that come into mind. If you really think about it, it's almost like a defense mechanism, right? I'm just kind of, before I feel any fear or rejection, although ironically, I'm already feeling it because I'm already imagining that that's what's happening. I'm saying, don't even risk it, Angela. Don't even do it, right? Those are kind of the thoughts. And those thoughts repeat no matter what scenario it is. So it drives the same feelings, drives the same behavior. Now, the last one, the core belief, it isn't in this chain analysis. I like it because it's a great way to break down and dissect the events or the internal processes, really what happened in a certain situation. So you'll see that level four isn't in this chain analysis, which I will go through a little bit deeper. But before that, we do have some free worksheets out there. If you're interested in practicing, again, every skill needs practice. You can download this at www.evo-skills.com. So there, I've put together a chain analysis worksheet where you can describe the event, what thoughts came up, what emotions did you feel, how did you respond, or what actions did you take, and what was the outcome. So go and give that a try. Again, the more you practice, the better you'll be at it. When I first did this, I was not good. I couldn't tell the difference between a thought or emotion. Surprisingly hard if you've never practiced this skill, but the more I started to be able to kind of tease them out, it became a lot easier. Now, what are core beliefs and why are they so kind of hard and where does it come from, right? So, core beliefs are deeply buried internal assumptions of how we view ourselves, others, and the world around us. So, I want to share some facts from therapistaid.com. People are not born with core beliefs, they are learned. Core beliefs usually develop in childhood or during stressful or traumatic periods in adulthood. So, usually develops in childhood. So subconsciously, we probably don't even realize it's being developed. Information that contradicts the core beliefs is often ignored. And it is so true when I experience this. No amount of fact can even convince myself, even though I'm usually a very logical, rational person, but once it hits across the core belief, it almost like my brain does not want to believe it. So negative core beliefs are not necessarily true, even it feels true. Exactly. Core beliefs tend to be rigid, long-standing. However, they can be changed. So that's the exciting part. Now, like I said, most of what I've gone through is about observing, because I think observing, being able to see it first, is the most important step. In the next part, which in the new kind of series I'll be developing released in April, we'll talk about how to kind of change that. So this is an example. I like this from Therapist 8 again. So core beliefs are like a pair of sunglasses, but every has a different shade. So let's look at the situation. You meet a new person, you think about asking them to go out for coffee. If my core belief was I'm not worthy, my thought might be, why would they ever want to go out with me? Does not. So therefore, I don't even ask the person out to coffee. Kind of similar to, hey, why do I need to participate in brainstorming? Most of the time, I'm just avoiding the situation, right? Just avoid the rejection. I'll never be disappointed, right? Now, secondly, if my core belief was I am worthy, I might think, oh, we're gonna have fun together if we go out together. And also, if they can't make it, that's okay next time, right? Not a big deal, right? Well, my behavior might be to ask the person, and if they do reject me, no biggie, right? That's okay. I just met this person, so very different. I guess behavioral result and outcome of the situation. So now, what really intrigued me is that, okay, so once I understood the core belief, I wanted to know where they came from and how they formed, right? So I did more research and kind of understand digging. And just because I really like to know where things and how things come about. So in episode 4, I covered this. How can core beliefs be formed? Now, this is a theory, and I'm synthesizing different things, different uh, articles together and everything to kind of create this pathway, right? So I touch upon Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which was introduced in the theory of human motivation back in the I want to say pretty far back. I can't remember the year right now, but while like in this basically in hierarchy, and it talks about how the lowest level, the bottom level is our physiological needs, then it's safety, love and belonging, esteem, and self-actualization. Now, later research does support that the human needs doesn't necessarily follow this pyramid or this hierarchy, but it does, to me, provide a very simple framework to understand human motivation. So it's possible that people will get to self-actualization like starving artists, um, who doesn't meet their safety or physiological needs, but they are really following their heart, right? So that's the flip side. But regardless, this is just a simple framework to explain kind of human motivation, human needs. Now, the second one I really stumbled upon, this is a lot newer, called Seven Primal Questions by Mike Foster. And in his book and in his research, there's 7 questions. He breaks it down that way that everyone needs, or everybody experiences, and he defines them out. And he defines them as safety, security, love, wanted, successful, good enough, and do I have purpose? So to me, very similar to Maslow hierarchy, except he didn't put in the physiological part of it. He's just breaking it down. And in these, I encourage you to read the book, or listen to the book. Very short read, easy read. He describes what, if one of these is your primal question, how it drives your behavior, because of a lot of your personality. So it's very interesting. So basically synthesize all this together and put it into just 4 main buckets. I think when basic needs are met, all humans need, based on Maslow's hierarchy, based on the 7 primal questions, pretty much need all this. So the first one is just physiological, right? You're in pain, you're starving, you're thirsty, and all that. Anytime we're under that kind of stress, most of the time we don't behave the best way, because we are, in our minds, our body is built for survival. So you're hungry and everything. That's why you get hangry, right? Safety and security is having resources and also safety protection against wild animals, or safety against weather, survival, right? Love and wanted, or a sense of belonging is, and you'll see lots of research on this, that as humans we are wired to want to belong, because again, it is much a higher chance of survival if we're in a pack, right? Rather than spread out, especially in the caveman era, right? If we're trying to go against a bear, it's better that there's probably 5 of us than 1 of us, right? We have a higher chance of success. So love and belong in a tribe is very important to us. Last one is about kind of that self-actualization, right? What Maslow's hierarchy is about: success, enough, and purpose, that we are worthy to be in this world, right? Just being who we are. So now, if all these things we are met, life is good. We're fulfilled. Usually, as humans, we don't think much of it. But if it's not, that's usually when it becomes the issue. Our survival brain kind of kicks on. So this is just explaining the 7 questions. If our caregiver, typically in childhood, responded with a no, or maybe to any of these needs, it's possible to form a negative core belief, right? So if you really dig deeper, sometimes for me, it's actually, and I feel like I have several of these. At one point, it definitely drove my behavior. I'm not loved. I'm not wanted. I'm not enough. Are definitely part of my core belief, and I can see it now that going through this journey and process and learning more about myself, but it was very difficult growing up to see. So now, why does this get stored that way, right? So I also, in episode 5, I dug into the memories, because knowing that these, I guess, core needs driving our core beliefs, I felt like was enough. I wanted to know the scientific and neuroscience behind it. Why did it do that? So then it led me down the path of memories, and kind of human memory and how it's stored. So this very briefly, 3 types of human memory: sensory memory, which is about our senses, that typically lasts seconds; short-term memory that lasts minutes; and then long-term memory that typically lasts a lifetime, or can last a lifetime. So I'm going to delve deeper into long-term memory, just because it is more tied to kind of our core belief, and or any negative core belief and our reactions to that. So in long term, they break it apart into explicit and implicit memory. One is considered conscious, implicit is considered unconscious, and explicit breaks down even more to semantic, which are our facts and knowledge, and episodic, which are our personal events. So semantic memory, simply just facts, right? I know how to do this equation, or in your profession, you know how to code. You remember that this is how, or for me in the past, like data analytics, I remember the facts, knowledge, how data and the relationships, right? Episodic is about personal events. So remember that a month ago, I went to a lovely ski trip with my friends and family, right? And it was an enjoyable time. That is very conscious. I can consciously remember it. Now, an implicit memory generally is unconscious. So 2 types there. Or summarize two types. The first one, procedural, so are kind of our motor skills. That is like when they say it's like riding a bike. Once you learn it, and maybe you haven't done it a few years, once you get back on, it's kind of like that memory unconsciously kind of kicks back in. Same with typing, right? We don't really need to consciously think about, well, once you know how to type, which letter is where, you're just reading and you're just typing. And that is our implicit memory. Now, on the other side to it is called emotional or conditioning or priming, different words depending where you look at. And that one tends to store any quick responses, or kind of memorizes anything that we need to do for protection, right? It basically, once it's stored there, it bypasses any conscious thought that you can have, and it's designed to help you react really quickly in a survival instinct. In fact, this type of memory gets stored really close to our fight or flight centers. So, for example, if you had ever been for me, like I stepped into ant pile and got bit on my feet. And anytime I see an ant pile, I mean, I react really quickly. I'm like running the other way. You don't really need to, I don't really need to think about it too much, right? Or if we smell something sometimes too, right? There's an emotional connection to it. Or if you notice, this is also where triggers kind of sit and kind of go into that more. So, how does this all connect? How does unmet needs get stored in memory? So, if in childhood again you got responded with a no or maybe to any of those core needs that I spoke about, right? Am I safe, loved, or enough, etc. Right? Any of those. If I got a response that said no, our brain, because it's a need, it's going to perceive that as a threat to our survival. And because it got stored as a threat, it's maybe stored in our implicit memory for automatic retrieval. Basically, it's saying, hey, I'm not loved. I'm not wanted. We better make sure we're in survival mode. It needs to kick on so that I can be loved and wanted. Right? I need to get that. I need to get that because otherwise I might not survive. Again, it's our kind of our primal state of our brain, wired for a certain time, but maybe not for the modern world. Now, instead, if it was yes, usually no threat is perceived. Generally, you can record those events in explicit episodic memory. So let's go through kind of an example, at least for me. So for me, a big one is I'm not wanted or don't belong. So whatever happened in my childhood, I got the message that Angela, this is not, if you behave this way, this is not acceptable. You're out of the tribe type of situation. And I can think of several scenarios that could have happened or could be a recurring theme that my parents just kind of passed down. Right. So now what happens if it's captured in my implicit memory? I have this negative core belief. It's there. So I'm going to react. Right. So thoughts of sharing my ideas and being rejected, right? That's going to be a triggering stimulus for me because I'm afraid of being rejected. At the deep end of it, it's just rejection means bad. Rejection means not surviving. So I'm going to avoid that situation as much as possible. In fact, this core belief also, our brains are really good patterns, also gets kicked on, whether I realize it or not, also with friends. If a friend can't make it to a planned event, I can start to feel very unwanted. And then what happens if you're unwanted? Stress responses come out, right? So not sharing my idea, I freeze, not contributing to a team brainstorming session. Now, my friend, instead, I probably fawn. So I'd be like texting her and making sure that, hey, I'm still liked and wanted. So this is what happens, right? Hey, all four bubbles are good, but somehow I'm not wanted or I'm not loved. My brain will perceive a threat and then get into, like I said, our brain's survival response. So again, scientifically, when our brain is thinking it's under threat, it will release cortisol and adrenaline to increase our heart rate, to increase our ability to respond to a threat. Right? We start to have tunnel vision. This is why when you're talking to someone and you can tell they're triggered because nothing you say makes any sense, and nothing they say, no logic can get through to them because their brain is already ready to fight for it. But it's designed for survival, right? From evolutionary perspective, it's wired that way. It is ready to give us the best chance to survive, but it doesn't know the difference between actual threat and perceived threat. So with the help, generally, how we can calm ourselves down is there's breathing. If you're physiologically already like pumped up, different set of exercises, which I will go through again in the next part of the series in the doing level. But also ability to put our thinking cap back on, right? Basically activating our prefrontal cortex over a limbic system, which is what is triggered by, to help us realize that, hey, I know you think we're in a threat response, but we're actually not. We are not attacked by bears. We are not being like kicked out and then being finned for ourselves to death. It's just that part of our brain is thinking we are. So this is a tool that I shared and remember episode 4 or 5 about the hand model. So especially if you're a tactile learner, it's a very effective model just to help you maybe see when you're in that mode, what's happening. So the idea here in the hand model by Dr. Siegel is that it's a hand model of the brain. So this is our this is our brainstem. So this is controls kind of those involuntary functions of our body, our heart beating, breathing. We don't have to think about it. Then it's usually the limbic system, or they call it sometimes the caveman brain, right? This is where it is the fight or flight kind of center. It helps us memories and things like that. And then of course on top is our prefrontal cortex. And this is with regulation, self control, problem solving. Really, we want a regulated brain like this. So all three brains are connected. So we have a balanced approach to approaching a problem or situation. When we are in a threat response, however, this one goes way up. This one's in control now because it is, and this one is kind of just disconnected out there. And so they call this flip the lid. And I showed a fun video with my son what a child flip the lid might looks like. In fact, this is more for using for children. But if you flip the lid, what we're trying to do is help you realize if you did this, you're in a flight response, right? You're in a fight or flight response. You're in a stress response. Really want to be able to bring the lid back down so that it can be connected. Because sometimes we're not really in a threatening situation where this needs to be disconnected. So that's one tool. Now the other tool I went over is called the 5 stress responses. With our lid is flip, we tend to think that we have 5, there's usually commonly 5 stress responses. One is freeze, fight, flight, faint, or friend. So freeze is immobile, shutting down, just like I said, don't contribute anything. Fight is aggression, anger, or physical resistance. So, or even verbal attacks, right? It's a fight. Flight is avoiding, escapes. Just like, I'm not going to even attend the meeting. Faint is dissociation with numbing oneself to avoid. It could be alcohol, eating, drinking, really numbing. I mean, binge watching TV. I do a lot of that just to numb myself. And then friend or fawn is about people pleasing. So I feel rejected for the person. I might try to, win them over because again, I want to be part of the tribe. I want to survive that way. So those are the 5 responses. And there's actually a practice worksheet, a free one out there. If you are interested, this helps you, again, we're practice on observation to describe different scenarios in your past and then bucket them to which stress response did you use? And if you can, what negative core belief might have triggered your stress? Again, we're practicing this skill of can you recognize what's happening in your own mind? Again, very powerful exercise. When I first started, really hard. Now it's a lot easier. I can easily kind of connect, oh, wait, this is tied to this negative core belief. And for mine, the pattern that keeps coming up right now for me is still love and belonging. So, now there's one more topic I didn't really cover is about observing our feelings. So this is a feelings wheel in the slide. Dr. Gloria Wilcox created it in 1982. And it's really about developing our feelings vocabulary. So being able to take note and acknowledge how you feel is a big step towards self-compassion. So I've talked about kind of core belief. I've talked about thoughts and patterns. Now, emotions are usually a byproduct of our thoughts. So in this, again, in that brainstorming session at work, if my thought was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to look stupid if I say something that doesn't make sense, or they're not going to like my idea. If that was my thought, my emotion might be feeling rejection before it happens, right? Versus if I had approached the session like this, like, oh man, I have this great idea. I'm excited to share it with the team and really get feedback on it. Now I'm excited, right? You can see kind of even the way I describe it, you can feel the difference, right, between the thought. It's a byproduct. So this tool is a great starting point if you have low, and I did very low vocabulary and feelings. It's not something we talk about. It's not something we practice in our educational background. So this feelings wheel is very useful in giving you that list. So the other one I really like for the modern era, I would say, is the How We Feel app, just because it's an app, it's free, and you can pretty much type how you feel and they'll give you kind of suggestions. You can find it, right? So a lot easier than, for me at least, looking at the wheel. Um, and they color it different colors depending on how you're feeling. If you're excited, happy, or more the blue is kind of like the sad, and they categorize it with different shapes as well. Very easy. They also have they integrated AI into it. So now after you name your emotion, again, you're just practicing, you can also type in, journal about it, like, okay, I felt rejected because of this situation, and then you can click on go deeper, and an AI will actually read it and then ask you deeper questions, and you can stop at any time, you keep going deeper. And I find it very helpful, just to, it's kind of like a little therapist in your app. So now, of course, it doesn't replace that, but still, it's pretty nifty, again, for the modern era. And I like that it describes. There's a definition for each feeling, and because sometimes I can feel that emotion or feeling that's happening, but I don't know the right word for it. So reading it kind of helps me understand that. So, if you want to practice naming your feelings, I also encourage you to do this chain analysis, because in there it'll tell you, hey, this is my thought and this is my emotion. Again, making that connection. It's just a byproduct. So, naming emotions is usually how, or emotions and feelings, usually what we feel first in a situation. And because we can sense something is not right, if we can. If not, sometimes, I mean, I wasn't really good at this in the beginning as well. So, but now I am, with more practice of observation, it is, I would say, a lot better. So that's just a summary of the first 6 episodes of what I cover. Again, just kind of quick and kind of string everything together. If you want to go deeper, definitely go through the other episodes, right? So pretty much I go through, the level 2 is about seeing the levels of self-awareness, right? It'll help you, give you a framework, and to maybe assess, like, how deep have you gone, right, into self-awareness. Is it just telling people, hey, I did this and I shouldn't have. I don't think that that was the right reaction, because that's really what happened, right? And then can you go deeper of seeing your own patterns? Do I do this in different situations, but I have the same repeated behavior or even thoughts, right? And then the really, really big bonus is really getting it all the way down in there into our core beliefs, right? What, especially around negative core beliefs, because that is what drives, and that, like I said, store in our implicit memory. It's automatic, so it bypasses all our conscious memories and anything, and just reacts, right? Because that's there to protect us. Now, if you're able to see it, though, the next time, hopefully, it's to help your brain realize, wait a minute, I'm not in a real threat situation here. Let me see what is going on, and kind of bring that cap back down. So this is, and I always say this, I believe there's no one size fits all. What I do go through in this series, and my style, is to teach and show you different tools that I've seen and experiment with. And this is all the tools that we've went over. Went from meditation, chain analysis, levels of self-awareness, the hand model. I have a stress response log. There's also 7 primal questions. There's something called a downward arrow. There's a stress trigger log, feelings wheel, how we feel app. All these different tools that I show you, and all we're doing is putting it in a toolbox. And when you encounter a scenario, the idea is to be able to have these tools in your tool belt, so you can use it to access or assess what's going on, and to really help ourselves self manage, right? Be able to handle the situation and know and be aware of what's happening, because a lot of times it's usually in our own minds. So that's how I like to describe it. More episodes to come. I hope you enjoyed this one. I will be moving up to the next set of tools, which is about the doing part. So again, these are the tools. I encourage you to practice it. The more I use several of them, I use the app, I use the response log, naming emotions. Again, it's just sometimes in different scenarios, you just need different tools that help. And the next one is about really doing. How do we take ourselves, like, especially in negative behavior? Like, for example, if I never spoken up, obviously this early in my career, I probably wouldn't have got to the position that I did get, right? Or without this level of self awareness, I wouldn't have been able to change my career, right? Probably a couple of times. I started off as an auditor, then I went to become a data um, consultant around analytics and business intelligence. I mean, and then furthermore, I changed again into talent development. If I didn't have these tools or the ability to really understand that, hey, these are my strengths and this is how I can handle and not feel that I couldn't, I wouldn't have taken the steps and I wouldn't have grown as much as could have in my career. So, and now I'm on this very, very different journey of doing this. I realize my own passion is actually in teaching. It's funny because I always gravitated towards it at work, anyways. That's probably how I landed my last position as director of strategy and talent development. And now just continue on that path. And self management is one of those skills that really enable us to do that, right? To really conquer self doubt, really understand my own potential and believe in myself. Because if you don't believe in yourself, really, how can someone else believe in you, right? So I hope that you take these things and practice these skills and believe that you can do anything you want. As long as you have the skills. And this is why I love meta skills, right? It's that skills to enable us to do other skills. Again, how did I able to jump around career and not really, probably besides now losing income, but my last 18 years, my income trajectory has been usually increasing. So like I said, next set of episodes will be about doing. So replacing negative reactions with productive behaviors towards self and others. We really focus on the self first. How do we not stop ourselves? I think is the biggest, and how do we help ourselves magnify our own strengths so that we can go down the career path that we want and not be afraid to do so. So if you've liked this episode and prior episode, I really encourage you to subscribe to our email newsletter where we'll send to you all the diagrams, the access to the decks, and the links to newsletters so you get the latest updates and the latest upcoming products that we will be developing in the future. And give me a like to this video if you enjoyed it. So thank you. Our next episode will be returning in April. It's been a pleasure, fun experience for me to break this down and really share this with anybody who's interested because it's really helped me again in my career journey and transition along the way. So hope you enjoyed these past few episodes. Love to hear from you. Any comments, questions in the chat, and I will see you next month.